This video tutorial will give you an introduction to the main functions in iLabber, the software as a service based electronic lab notebook. So after installing iLabber, you open the program and you come to My Lab Notebook. This user has already created several experiments, and you see in the My Lab Notebook lists of the experiments you've been working on most recently, and then reminder lists of experiments which you started but not submitted, experiments which have been sent to you by your colleagues for countersigning, and experiments which you've sent to a colleague for countersigning. All of these links can be clicked to open the experiments. And here you see an example of an iLabber experiment, and they're made up of different sections, and each section contains different content, for example text, images, Excel files, etc. On the left hand side, under My Lab Notebook, you can browse through your experiments by year and by project, and these lists of experiments can be sorted, and also double clicking these will open the experiments in the same way. Here's another experiment with several Excel sheets. Clicking on the link takes us back to My Lab Notebook. You can also click on the link to see the contents of your entire notebook, which will show you all the experiments you've created with iLabber, and again these can be sorted by clicking on the headers. F5 will take you back to your My Lab Notebook. Okay, so now we will look at how to start a new experiment. So in the middle of My Lab Notebook is a large button, Start New Experiment. Click on that, and you have a choice of starting with a blank experiment or an experiment created from a template. We'll come to templates later, so here we go with the blank experiment, and this mimics the paper lab notebook. Each experiment is given a unique experiment number. You get assigned 100 numbers when you first create your first experiment. The experiment has its author and a time and date when it was first created. There are also places where you insert a title and assign a project. These must be inserted at some stage, but we can do that later. There's already a text section here where we can immediately start entering some text. Okay, so now we're going to look at all the section types and see how we can add different data to our experiment. So we started off with the text section. All the sections we can change the title by clicking on the title and typing in a new title. For example, method. In the text section we have the usual word processor. We can change the font, font size, font color, etc. We can do bold, italics, underscore, subscript, superscript, strike through. We can add Greek letters and symbols using the symbol toolbox on the left hand side, so click per symbol and then double click on the symbol you want to introduce into the section. You can also insert symbols by using the Insert Symbol function on the top menu. To get the standard section toolbox back, click on the section toolbox button on the left hand side, and then we have the section toolbox back. We can insert tables into a text section using the table, insert, table, and then the size of the table on the top menu. And tables can be used when you don't need to use Excel, or they can also be used for an array of pictures or any other thing that you want to bring into the text section. Also in the text section we can use bullet lists and numbered lists. So on format, bullets and numbering, for example, we can have a numbered list. And this works in the same way as most word processors, and you just type in the list. If we had another text section, just by double-clicking on the in the section toolbox, we can import a Word document. Right-click, Import Document. This has to be done in a new section because it replaces any other text in the section. So we bring in this document, and as you see, all the document comes in with its formatting, different fonts, images, etc. Now it's much better to have all this in separate sections, so each of these paragraphs should really be in a separate section rather than in one large section, because with iLabber, if you make a change in a section, then the whole section is sent to our database with small sections as less information needs to be transferred. We can copy and paste, so here we are copying text from one section into another section. There's a spelling checker automatically. Misspelled words are underlined in red. If you right click, different words will be offered at different spellings which you can choose, or you can add it to your own dictionary, and this dictionary will be available to you wherever you log into iLabber, in the lab, in the office, at home. Sections can be deleted just by clicking the delete button or right-clicking delete. So, we've got the section toolbox on the left-hand side, and the next section is the image section. And you can click to import an image. So we brought in this image of a Western blot. Again, we change the title. Images can be resized by selecting and then dragging the corners. Image annotation tools are provided in iLabber. For example, the crop. We can reduce the size of an image. We can also crop outwards to create some space if you need to create space to add some text annotation to an image. For example, here we can add some text using the text button in the annotation tools. So then we can add an arrow and a circle, adjust the size, change the colour. The image section is saved in the iLabber database both with and without its annotations, so you can copy these to the clipboard or save them on your hard disk, both with and without the annotations as needed. We'll now add another image section, and this time we'll add a slightly larger image, and this will open up iLabber's image compression tool. The left-hand side shows the image without compression, the right-hand side after compression, to save space in the database and reduce the amount of data. Pressing OK will bring in the compressed image, and cancel will bring in the uncompressed image. So we press OK and bring in the compressed image. Let's add another image section, and here we can show that you can paste images from another application into an image section. We go to the other application, copy this to the clipboard, go back to iLabber Experiment and right click Paste or Ctrl V. We can crop this image, resize it as needed. Another way of doing a similar thing is to use iLabber's screen capture tool with another image section. Right click, capture image. It will take you to the other application open, or you can use Alt Tab. Select an area of the screen, and then that area is brought into iLabber. And again, we can change the title of any section. The next section type to look at is the Excel worksheet. So you click on that and then find an Excel file. And then you select the cells in the file which you want to be visible in the experiment. After selecting those, you close Excel and they are brought into the experiment. So there's an image of those cells, all the text becomes searchable, and also the Excel file itself is saved in the experiment. Again, we change the title. You can copy this section, you can copy any section in iLabber. You can go to another experiment. Paste this section. So if we open the section now, open up Excel, we can change some data in Excel. Maybe we're doing another experiment, something similar. Again, then select the cells, close Excel, and the new Excel file is saved in the database, and the new data is shown on screen and in the experiment. So we go back to our first experiment now. Two more section types, chemical sketch and chemical reaction, are not discussed today. Those are for special chemistry tutorial. And the next section type is the PDF document. So we add that section, click again, choose a PDF file, and that is brought into the experiment. Again, all the text which is visible becomes searchable. An image is created so you can see the PDF document, and the PDF document itself is saved in the iLabber database. And again, we change the title. So you can always save that PDF file from an experiment onto your hard disk. Another section type we'll look at now is the file attachment, and this can be used to attach any sort of file to an experiment. So you click that, you can select files, more than one if you want, and the files are brought into the experiment. A checksum is calculated, which can be used to prove that these files haven't been changed since they were brought into iLabber. We can change the title again. We can open these files if they're openable with any software on your computer. If you make changes and then close, those will be saved back into the iLabber database. But note that the text in the files isn't searchable. The only text which is searchable is that which you see in the experiment. But that's useful for bringing in other data which you want to have in an experiment but doesn't need to be visible. We can move sections up and down using these arrows here in the top toolbar, the yellow up and down arrows, so you can always adjust the way your experiment looks by moving sections up and down. Now go back to the top of the experiment, and this is what people see when they first open your experiments, so it's good to have good information here. We have to have a title and we have to have a project. So in the project section you click the box at the right hand side, choose a project or more than one project, and it's brought in. Also, if you know the project name, you can just type the first few letters, and then you can click on the check reference arrow at the top of the screen, or else you just click anywhere else in the experiment and it will bring in the project from if it matches anything in the project database. Up at the top of the experiment we can add other sections, for example using this text field, which is a single line text section. Here we can add, for example, keywords. So we can have a section called keywords and add some keywords, for example training, etc., iLabber. So when people first open your experiment they will see what you're working on. Another section we can add is a related experiment section to link to other experiments. If you're following somebody's work, copying somebody's work. So you can search for experiments using the same search tools which we'll show you later when we're looking for experiments. And that adds a link to the experiment. So you can click on these links and that will just open the experiment in another experiment window. So now we're going to look at cloning experiments and other ways of saving time. So here's that experiment we just opened. It's somebody else's experiment, but I have the rights to look at it, so I can also clone it. So I go File, Clone Experiment. Maybe I'm doing a similar piece of work. And that will create a brand new experiment with my name, an experiment, new experiment number. It doesn't have a title. It's a new experiment, so it has to have a new title. So here are all the same sections as were in that other experiments which we cloned. But maybe I'm doing this formulation with slightly different quantities, so I can just open the Excel sheet, change the data, select the cells, close Excel, and the new data comes into the experiment. And then I change the other information in the experiment based upon what I'm doing now. Another thing is you can save any section in the toolbox, saving it for further use. So you right click on the section title and go Save in Toolbox. And then that section, so that's not an empty section but a section with data, will be found in My Sections on the left hand side. And then just double clicking on these works in exactly the same way as the standard empty sections in the normal section toolbox. It adds the section to the experiment, but of course now we've got a section with data. And this works with all the section types. You can right click and delete or rename as you need if you no longer need them or if you want to change the name. And click back at the bottom of the section toolbox to get back the standard empty sections. So now we're going to move on to signing and witnessing experiments. So when you've completed the experiment, you've given it a title, you click on the Submit Experiment, that's the padlock at the top left hand corner. You can submit the entire experiment or from the top down to the section you selected, but here we'll go with the entire experiment. We click OK. It remembers who your most recent witnesses are. They'll appear on the list here, but otherwise you click on Witness and then click on Search, and that will give you a list of all the people, which of your colleagues are available to witness this experiment. You choose which one you're going to use and then click OK. And then iLabber will create a PDF document of the experiment, which is seen here. So you can look at that. If everything's okay, you click Next, and then you put in your signature, your password, which creates the electronic signature, which is attached to the PDF document. And that's the same password as you use to log into iLabber. So now you see down the left hand side there's a dotted line to show, and a padlock at the bottom to show you that this experiment is locked. You can copy and paste, you can copy sections, paste them into other sections, but you cannot make any changes in this experiment. Okay, we now log in as the witness. And that experiment appears now in their list, experiments waiting to be countersigned by you. They click on that. The experiment PDF opens. They can look at the PDF. If everything's okay, they click countersign, and then they add their password and their electronic signature to the document as well. Of course, when an experiment is signed and witnessed, it's not finished with. You can always add more sections. So we're back at the experiment now. We're adding another section. Maybe we got some analysis results back a few weeks later. Maybe experiment's going on over several weeks and you want to lock it during that time, submit over different days. If you found there was a mistake earlier, you can add an errata section. And here you can choose different levels of errata. So we click on the symbol at the right hand side, and you can have an alert, a warning for your colleagues that there's something not quite right maybe about this experiment. You see the errata symbol at the top on the menu bar, and also at the very top on the left hand side. You can also flag an experiment as invalid. Again, we get this red symbol now. You can type in some text as to why it's invalid. Okay, we're now going to look at how we can share experiments in iLabber, and that is to let colleagues add sections to your experiments. So each section still belongs to one person. You can't have two people working on a section. Anyhow, we go now to the Properties tab, because this is a property of an experiment that it can be shared. And Properties is a third button at the top left. Opens the Properties, we click on the Sharing, and then we say we're going to share this experiment. Click on Update Users, and again we can search as we did for Witness, and we get a list of users in this project. An experiment must be in a project before you can share it. We choose a user, we save this, and we go OK. So now this experiment is shared with that other user. So we log out. We're going to log in as that other user. And the experiment will now appear in their list of current experiments on their MyLab notebook. So they can open it in the usual way by clicking. So here's the experiment. But you see, on the left hand side, the toolbox is not active. They have to take control of the experiment by clicking the Edit Experiment button. That's the second button at the top left. That will activate the section toolbox. This is that only one person can edit an experiment at a time. And they can add as many sections as they want using the section toolbox. So for example, they've added a text section. So they can add some text. And then when they're finished, they click Release. And that will release the section, adds a little timestamp to that section. And when they've done that, the author of the experiment can then submit it in the usual way. Until the contributor has released their sections, the author cannot submit the experiment. And it's very clear then which sections belong to which author. So following from sharing, we'll go on and looking at templates, which add a lot of structure to experiments, but also save a lot of time in producing experiments. For MyLab Notebook, we go to the third button at the top here, which is the Template Navigator. And we can create a new template by clicking the Create New Template button. We can have a template, can be a personal, just for your own use, or public to be shared with your colleagues. We type in a name and we can have a description. And this will then open the template editor. This is very similar to the experiment editor. Same section toolbox, and a yellow band down the right hand side to remind you that you're working on templates and not experiments. So then you can add sections and edit sections in exactly the same way as you do in an experiment. So we can add an Excel sheet, for example. We can take out the actual data, so we've got the empty sheet, which is ready to do some calculations when we put in the values from the experiment. Again, we can change the title. We can have an image section, for example, so somebody wants to paste in an image. So we can build up the structure of the experiment. And this will save a lot of time when people create the experiment, because they won't have to add all these sections. And also we can define how the experiment should look. So at the top we can add, for example, that keyword section. Also, you can choose whether a section is locked, which means it cannot be deleted, whether it's mandatory, or whether it's read-only. Mandatory sections must have some data, and you get a little star next to the title to show you that you have to add something. We can even add a project to a tutorial to save people having to enter the project if it's a template for a particular project. Another section type we can add to templates is a user-defined reference section. This can be used to create drop-down lists. For example, we can have a list of instruments. So let's add instrument, we make it a mandatory locked section, and then we click on the box on the right-hand side, similar to the project box. Here we add different values. So this is an instrument, so we can have LCMS. We add that. NMR. Add that. GCMS. And this can be, you can have 20 different values here of different things for a lookup list. So then we save the template. Templates must be saved, not like experiments which saved automatically. So we've saved the template. Let's close the template now. And then we go back to My Lab Notebook so we can start a new experiment. And this time, rather than using a blank experiment, we'll use the template. So we click on Template, click on the template, and we create a new experiment. We've got a new experiment number, we've got the author, the date and time. We've already got the project filled in. We've got that drop-down list. We can choose which instrument we're using. And we've got the other sections as they were defined in the template. So that's shown you how you can use templates. You can also save an experiment as a template as well. So now we'll move on to searching experiments, which is a great advantage of iLabber compared to paper lab notebooks. So back in My Lab Notebook, we've already seen how at the left-hand side you can navigate through your experiments with these folders. And in the same way, the second button at the top takes you to the library, and we can look at all your colleagues' experiments by author in a very similar fashion. So they're sorted by name, by year, and by project. In the same way, you can browse through the experiments from any project. So all the experiments are sorted by project and name and date as well. So you get these lists of experiments. And that's a quick way of finding experiments if you know who did the work or which project it was. But you can also search, and you can search both in My Lab Notebook or in all the notebooks which you're allowed to see. So you can do Google type searching, so you just type in a word and all the experiments containing that word will be found. You can use Boolean logic. For example, here we can put a plus and have 2 words and find just one experiment with the 2 words. We can go into advanced searching. So here you can search the experiment number, you can search just in the title, you can search by project, you can search by date, so you can say I'm interested in all the experiments in the last month or 2 on a particular project, and then we find those experiments. So that's very useful for a project leader. They can easily go into iLabber and see all the experiments created in the last month on their project. So that finishes this introduction to iLabber, and good luck using iLabber. Thank you.